All right. Fourth String Podcast. We are live. Ben is joining us from an undisclosed location somewhere in North Carolina. I am back in the man cave at the house. We just got back today. Had a good trip in Roanoke with family. Ben, a happy belated Thanksgiving to you.
Oh, same to you, sir.
Yeah, man.
Happy Black Friday.
Happy. Did you go Black Friday shopping? Get any
We
deals?
did.
Did you really?
Not great deals,
You know, I've never
but
been.
seriously.
Never. I have no desire to. Zero. Like none.
Oh man, you're in like the Black Friday capital of the world in Roanoke. Or at
There's
least
well,
you were.
there's few reasons you can get me up at 4 a.m. Going shopping is not one of them. And like
We
saving money has like no interest to me because I'm like the first person to be like, I don't care. Like it costs like $100 for a stick of juicy fruit. Like that's fine. If I want the juicy fruit, like I'll just pay whatever they tell me to pay. I don't care. You
Oh
know,
my gosh, man! I
like
work in
that's how I
pricing.
am. I don't
That's
do that. Like
terrible.
I don't haggle. Like I bought my car. I went to the dealership. The guy was like, "This is your interest rate." I'm like, "Great." I don't do any of that. I don't believe in it.
Well, it's
I trust
tradition for
people, man.
us, so
Yeah.
it was a good time. We did
Well,
not get up
good.
early, but it
Well,
was
good.
good.
Good. I had a bunch of turkey yesterday. Literally fell asleep at about 7 o'clock. Woke up at
Awesome.
about 9. Nicole phoned on the stairs. It was interesting.
Oh
Um,
no.
she phoned on like 3 stairs. It wasn't that bad,
Oh, that's bad.
but it is
You
interesting
should have
because it's
seen
the
the
same
egg ball,
setup.
man. You missed the egg
It's.
ball.
I know I missed the egg ball. Well, I woke up during the onside kick attempt at the end of the game. That's what I saw was the onside kick attempt. That was it. And then I went back and watched some highlights. So anyways, and then woke up to Nicole falling down the same set of stairs I fractured my big toe on senior year of soccer. So those stairs, I'm telling you, man, lethal.
They need to get replaced.
They'll get you.
Replace
Oh, they'll
those
get you.
stairs.
Yes, sir.
Put some
Um,
traction on them.
so I'm excited. So we're going to talk about, we got lots of cool stuff to get into today. We're going to do the college football rankings. We're talking about that. I want to talk about some of these head coach hirings. Matt Rhule hired again today in Nebraska. So excited to see him back in the college football atmosphere. So we're going to get into that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this Auburn job. And to lead into Auburn and Nebraska, I'm going to give you guys the best college football tier ranking that you've ever seen. So I think there's, and by the way, I care about 30 programs. Outside of those 30, I really don't care. So I've got those 30 into 3 different tiers. I'm going to get into that. If you're not in the 30, I'm sorry, you don't belong in a tier. You're not noteworthy. You're all just somewhere beneath those tiers. And I don't care how you rank them after that. That's up to you. But 3 tiers, that's it. So we're going to get into that, which I'm excited about. By the way, right now, Florida State are going at it 14-14. NC State beat UNC in a thriller. I tweeted this out. UCLA ended up beating Cal, but Ben, it was close. And if Cal had knocked off UCLA and sent UCLA to 8-4 after just a few weeks ago, we were thinking they could sneak into the playoff. They could win the Pac-12. What a disaster that would have been for Chip Kelly.
Yeah. Well, look, Chip Kelly is a lucky duck. His going on it on 4th down like 3 times to end that game was not wise. Dude, you're on the 20-yard line. Kick a field goal and put the game away. What are you doing?
Yeah.
He's lucky that Cal fumbled it to end the game because they didn't deserve to win that one, quite frankly.
I tell you, it's interesting. There are so many teams and coaches that September, October, we were like, oh my God, look at these teams. And now we're sitting here in November and it's like, what's happened? Like Syracuse, they're 6-5. If they lose, here's a question. If they lose tomorrow to Boston College and they fall to 6-6, is Dino Babers, who entered the season on the hot seat, is he back on the hot seat? Because I would say yes. Like I know they started off 6-0. Like did game day go up there? I think for the Clemson game, I forget. Like whatever, they were 6-0, like undefeated. Everything looked great. I'm sorry, but if you end the year on 6 straight losses, like what have you really
That's
done?
terrible.
You know?
Yeah, no, I think
Lane Kiffin
it
at
heats
Ole
up
Miss.
again.
Yeah.
Dude, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin yesterday, and granted, There's rumors that he may be coming to Auburn, so we'll see what happens here.
Yeah.
Dude, he needs to leave that dumb analytics book in Oxford if he does. Because he makes stupid play calls off of gutsy decisions, which don't pay off half the time. And
I
those
gotta tell you,
he
Ben,
shouldn't do
the
it.
way in which he lost, it makes me wonder, was Auburn ready to hire him and then watch that game and said, this is Gus Malzahn 2.0? Like, it's a guy who goes by the book. He's got this way of doing things. It doesn't matter, what's happening on the field. If the book tells him you got to go for it here, you got to pass it here, you got to run it here, that is exactly what he's going to do. And it does cost, like, it can win you some games maybe you're not supposed to win, but it costs you some games you were definitely supposed to win. And that's what happened yesterday.
Yep.
And I do wonder just the way in which he lost, and because of the recency of Auburn fans being so frustrated with Gus, would they just decide to not hire Kiffin based on that?
Yeah. There's a new AD.
And I've got a name that's not entered the Auburn head coaching search. I'm going to throw it at you. You're going to be like, what the crap?
I think the fan base has its own opinion.
Yeah.
And our new athletic director will make the call. And I don't know if everyone's going to agree with it. Okay. Everyone will get on board, but I don't think everyone's going to agree. So
here's the thing. And we're going to talk more about the Auburn head coaching job here a little bit later. So this is not part of it. But I've had this thought then. There's a name that has not been part of the chat because right now it feels like it's Hugh Freeze or Lane Kiffin going to Auburn. Maybe they retain Cadillac Williams. Maybe, right? Why is Urban Meyer not being discussed?
Because he has no character.
Neither does Auburn. I hate to break it to you. It's the perfect fit. Like, that was my exact thought process. But I'm thinking,
look at Cadillac.
Auburn's reputation needs rebuilt. Auburn's reputation needs rebuilt. Urban's reputation needs rebuilt. Urban, I mean, say what you will. Say what you will about what he did at Ohio State, what he did at Jacksonville. Say what you will. The guy knows his X's and O's. And if you want a comp
until he has a heart attack next season and quits,
well, that could happen too. But I'm telling you, I would take 3 to 5 years of greatness with Urban Meyer, and then you can rebuild it. Like, you're not going to be worse off.
No. So here's the thing that I've heard a lot of people say is if we extended Cadillac and gave him the job, it'd be like when LSU hired Ed Orgeron.
Yeah.
And I was like, did they not win a national title like a year or two after that? Let's do it, man.
I was the first one, by the way, that argued Ed O should have gotten that job.
He did a good job with it.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with hiring a guy for a longer extended interim period. Right? Like, I think we all knew when LSU hired Ed O, like, this is not the guy long term. This is not the guy that we want 5, 6, 7 years from now. But for the next 1 to 2 years, can he guide us? Yes. And he did, right? And it blew up massively, but you won a national title, right? So what do you care, right?
Yep.
And so if you can bring in Cadillac Williams, hire an amazing offensive coordinator, hire an amazing defensive coordinator, bring in a bunch of transfers, bring in a bunch of high-profile recruits, and be great for the next 1 to 2 years. Figure out the coach then, right? I mean, like, I like Hugh Freeze. I like Lane Kiffin. But, Ben, honest to God, are you in love with either one of those hires?
I am not at all.
I don't think most people are, And so I think if you've got a year or two to just wait until the ideal name comes out, why not do that? Just listen, keep Cadillac Williams on a 1-year retention. He's not going to care,
Nope.
Yeah, just keep him on a 1-year retention. When the coach that you're like, this is our guy comes out, go get him.
Yeah, pay him $5 million a year. Done.
Yeah. Nope. Yeah, he's not going to scoff at that. I love that idea. I think that's a phenomenal idea. All right, we got way off track. Let's get into the rankings. I want to come back to this. But let's do the rankings. Okay, so right now, the way this sits, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU is your top 4. Then you have LSU, USC, Alabama, 5, 6, and 7. And then Clemson, who does not belong anywhere near the top 20, is sitting at 8. You have Oregon 9, Tennessee 10. Okay, so I think we can effectively say Oregon and Tennessee are essentially out of this. Like, I don't see any path for those two teams. Unfortunately, I think there is a path for Clemson, according to the committee, that would get them in there. So I think you've got 8 teams that could potentially get in. Here's my thing then. Michigan, Ohio State tomorrow. As long as that game is relatively close, I do not want to see the loser penalized and kept out of the playoff. I think that would be a massive mistake by the committee if that's what ends up happening. Like, I think both of those programs have played to the point where right now they're easily in the top 4, right? So as long as the game's close, listen, somebody has to lose tomorrow. So somebody's going to lose, put them both in the playoff.
Well, it depends. So I am right there with you, except if USC beats Notre Dame and then wins the Pac-12 championship, you have the same argument for them, and they have a conference championship.
Yeah,
because,
but
look,
Ben,
Michigan and Ohio State, the Big Ten is pretty subpar below those two programs. So the competition that they've played outside of, and even inside their conference, not great. Outside their conference, not great. The pedigree of those two teams, even though they've been decently dominant, they haven't been outstandingly dominant, either of them. They've looked like crap in some games. Granted, some was weather-driven, some was injury-driven, and that's fine. But they're not. Neither one of those teams has been just absolutely crushing teams every single week in and week out. So there is a possibility where a USC Pac-12 champion gets in above a one-loss Michigan or one-loss Ohio State. And the problem child here is TCU. Because
TCU is a problem.
TCU is like, why can't they just lose, dude? Just please lose, TCU.
I hope they do.
Who do they play tomorrow? Iowa State? Come on. Just choke to Iowa State.
All right, so here's the thing. All right, so if TCU wins out, they're in, right?
Yep.
Like, I don't like it. I hate it. But if they win out, they're in.
You can't keep them out.
If they lose, I am fine with USC getting in. But if TCU wins out and the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game wins the Big Ten championship, which I think is going to happen, then I think it has to be Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, TCU. And here's the thing, Ben. USC struggled with Stanford, who's terrible, struggled with Arizona, who's not going to a bowl. Granted, Arizona's an improved team. I think Jedd Fisch has done an amazing job. I told you at the beginning of the year Arizona was going to be improved.
They beat Arizona State today.
Yeah, they did. No, I mean, listen, 5-7 this year. I think we're going to look at Arizona next year. They're going to be somewhere around 8 wins. Like, he has got that program rolling. But still, 5-win team this year. USC struggled with them. And USC struggled with Cal, who also is not going to a bowl game. If you look at Ohio State really didn't struggle with anybody except Northwestern, a game which was bizarre because of the wind. They still ended up winning it by 2 possessions. Maryland was a fun game, and Maryland, I would say, Maryland played their best game maybe of the past 5 years. Like, that game from Maryland and that game was absurd. They've never played that well. And Ohio State still beat them by 2 possessions. Like, you look at these games where Ohio State technically struggled, and they're all still 2 possession or more wins. If you look at Michigan here, they did have a close game with Illinois. And granted, that was rough. But that was their only close game of the year. Every other game, they absolutely annihilated their opponent. I'll give you one kind of hiccup, but USC's got 3, Michigan's got one, and Ohio State doesn't have one. Both Michigan and Ohio State, by the way, have games where they absolutely obliterated ranked opponents. Michigan crushed Penn State, who was ranked 10th, 41-17. Ohio State, who's I don't know what just happened here with my computer. That's gone off the grid. Let's see if I can kind of figure that piece out. I had their schedule put up here. Let me pull up Ohio State's schedule again. Ohio State crushed. They beat Notre Dame 21-10. They beat Penn State 44-31. They beat Wisconsin 52-21. And they beat Iowa 54-10. Like, I've got multiple instances where those two teams are just crushing other opponents, and I don't think USC is even capable of doing it to those same teams. Listen, I like USC. What Lincoln Riley has done with that program in year one is ridiculous, and Caleb Williams should probably be the Heisman winner to this point. But if you're giving me an 11-1 USC and I'm comparing it to an 11-1 Michigan or an 11-1 Ohio State, I feel very, very confident that's the better team, not USC. The other thing is
the better team isn't one of the ranking things for the playoff committee, though. Conference champions.
Those are the reasons they give us. But Ben, when has the committee ever listened to those reasons? Every single year we have an argument where we say, okay, look, if this is the reasoning, how did this team get into the playoff? Right? They're looking at, I mean, this thing's it's a television production, right? Which, by the way, hopefully that's why they put USC and not TCU, like, for the love. Like, I would love it if I had Georgia versus USC, and then I had Michigan and Ohio State in a rematch in the semifinal game. Like, best playoff ever. Like, I'll take that
incredible.
Take that all day long. Here's going to be the real kicker, though, Ben. LSU sits at 5. If they knock off Georgia in the SEC championship game, they're a 2-loss team. But are you going to tell me that beating Georgia is not worthy of moving them up a spot? Right? Because I think it is. Right? And are you going to tell me that winning the SEC championship shouldn't put you into the playoff? Like, winning the Pac-12 championship, like, I don't care about some conference championships. Winning the Pac-12 championship does nothing for me. You win the SEC championship, that does something for me, right?
Yeah.
So what do we do if Michigan, Ohio State's close, TCU goes undefeated, and LSU upsets Georgia? That's where I think some of the craziness ensues, because somebody's not getting into this thing that should.
Mm-hmm. That is.
And by the way, I think LSU, I think they could upset Georgia. Like, I think it's a long shot, but they're built. They are built. Well, they are built to defend Georgia's offense. Now, can Jaden Daniels, can he do anything in Georgia's defense? That's going to be the question. But LSU has the capacity to slow down Georgia and make that a close, ugly game.
Yeah. Look, if LSU beats Georgia, maybe they expand to the new playoff structure this year.
Just expand this year.
Yeah, they're like, look, guys,
let's just go ahead and do it.
This is it. Congratulations, everyone. New Year's 6 games are now playoff games. Congratulations.
Yeah. No, I think, unfortunately, what would happen is you'd have the winner of the Big Ten championship get the number 1 seed, right? You'd have Georgia fall to 2, TCU to 3, LSU to 4, and whoever loses the Big Ten championship tomorrow would not get out. So if LSU wins the SEC championship, that's what I think happens. But then you're going to have the argument of 10-2 LSU SEC champion over 11-1 USC Pac-12 champion into the playoff.
Look, if LSU had not gotten blown out by Tennessee at home, blown out, it looked like they were a Pee Wee JV high school team. just destroyed by Tennessee. Granted, Tennessee was one of those programs that everyone was singing their praises. We had them ranked really high until they fell apart. Still, the loss on a missed extra point to FSU we can forgive, but I don't know if anyone can forgive a blowout loss at home.
Yeah, well, and I think too, LSU's the one team that didn't move the ball against Tennessee's defense, right? Like, and I think you have to look at that and go, okay, South Carolina can put up 63 points on Tennessee, but LSU can't get in the end zone twice.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, LSU's had these games where the offense is just a complete dud. So I don't know, but again, if that's the case, Ben, then you're leaving out the SEC champion from the college football playoff.
Doesn't make any sense.
No, it's like I'm telling you, I think the end of this is going to be real weird. Now, Clemson's path to get in. I think LSU has to lose. USC has to lose. Bama, I don't think necessarily has to lose. I think Clemson winning the ACC championship, they're going to jump Bama. And I think TCU would have to lose as well. All of those things happen. I think Clemson, as long as they beat South Carolina, which I don't think is a given, by the way, I think Clemson could maybe jump in and make a run at this thing.
Yeah, that's a possibility. The thing that hurts Clemson is, one, the strength of the ACC, which is pretty bad.
Yeah, I know it's bad.
The team they're playing, UNC, for the ACC championship game.
Well, that's the other thing. They lost today.
Yeah. They lost to Georgia Tech last week.
Against their third-string quarterback?
Yes, third or fourth, one of the two. And then they lost to NC State this week because they can't kick field goals.
And NC State had their fourth-string quarterback.
So that doesn't look good for the ACC.
No, not at all. Well, no, that is the other thing, because 2 weeks ago we were looking at this like, all right, Clemson might play like number 12 North Carolina, and now is North Carolina even going to be ranked going into that game? Probably not.
They don't deserve it.
So that win looks a lot less interesting. That's going to be tight. I mean, if LSU loses, which I think probably is what happens, USC loses, which I think is a real possibility.
We'll see. That'll help Clemson, quite frankly. If Notre Dame, the team that beat Clemson, because granted, the Notre Dame Clemson game, you may or may not remember, is the same week that the Ohio State Northwestern game was, and the crazy windstorms that were happening in Ohio State were also happening in South Bend. And it was like two pick sixes and a blocked field goal that gave Notre Dame a 21-0 lead over that game. So that was kind of a freak game anyway. If Notre Dame beats USC tomorrow, Clemson stock shoots straight up.
I would agree with that. Yeah. So here's the other thing too that I think affects TCU. So Kansas is going to play Kansas State tomorrow. If Kansas upsets Kansas State, Texas would play in the Big 12 championship. As long as Kansas State takes care of business, they will play TCU in the Big 12 championship. So what does a Texas TCU rematch look like? Because Kansas State TCU legit looked like the better team for all four quarters. Texas looked awful against TCU, and TCU still struggled to beat them.
Yep. But Texas beat Baylor today. And Texas beat Baylor by 11 points.
Yeah. But they look good.
Mm-hmm.
Texas has been one of the most roller coaster up and down teams in a long, long time. Yeah, it's all over the place. So I think there's a lot of possibilities. Here is my prediction. Honestly, I think the Ohio State-Michigan game tomorrow is really interesting. Last I looked, and let me pull it up here. Last I looked,
Ohio State
Ohio
was like
State
a
was favored
14 and
by,
a half point favorite.
I saw 8. So Ohio
Oh,
State a
really?
14 and a half point favorite. Hold on. 14 and a half would be crazy.
Oh, it
8.
is 8.
Ohio State's favored by 8.
Who's
Okay.
14 and a half? Oh, that's Clemson, South Carolina. My bad.
Is Clemson a 14 and a half point favorite over South Carolina?
Yeah, give me the Gamecocks, baby. Give me the
That's really
Gamecocks
tough.
to cover.
Well, here's the thing about Michigan and Ohio State, which I think is really interesting. So, all right, Ben, if you put those two teams on a neutral field today, who would you take?
Between who?
Michigan and Ohio State.
It's Ohio State just because of their. I think they're a step above where Michigan is right now. But Michigan looks really good, man.
I would
it
take
depends on
Michigan because
which
I think their
Michigan
defense
team.
is better. I think their defense is better and it's more sustainable. And I also trust Jim Harbaugh more than I do Ryan Day. So neutral
Really?
field, yeah.
No, I
Ryan
take
Day in
Ohio
these big
State.
games, Ryan Day in these big games completely falls apart. Like these big games, I mean, he completely disappears. You watch him in the playoff, it doesn't work. It does not work. So like, yeah, no, I'm kind of out on Ryan Day winning these big games like this. But so here's the thing. So I would take Michigan on neutral field. By the way, I think neutral field, it's honestly probably like a flip a coin game. I don't think any team is like drastically better or worse. So I don't have a
That's
problem
what
with that.
these two.
Yeah. So I think we're probably in agreement on that. So here's the thing. Ohio State, does their home field advantage lean 8 points? I think it's closer to 5 to 6, right? So Vegas is telling you they think Ohio State's would be a 3-point favorite, 3 to 4 point favorite on a neutral field. That I disagree with. I completely disagree with. So I actually like Michigan to cover tomorrow. The other thing too is I think there's kind of this assumption that Ohio State is pissed after what happened last year and they're going to play way above their heads. I think Ohio State can come out really, really, really tight tomorrow and Michigan could go into Ohio State and pull off an upset, but it's going to be a close, ugly game. Right? So my prediction, I've got Georgia number 1. I think Michigan's going to get in at number 2. I think TCU will be number 3, though I don't agree with it. And then I think we're going to get Ohio State at number 4. And that, by the way, I think is a fantastic playoff. And so here's the thing. Michigan, I think, would crush TCU. Ohio State and Georgia, I think, would be real interesting. But even if we got a rematch of Ohio State and Michigan in the national title, could you imagine how insane that would be?
That'd be nuts.
That
That'd
would
be
be
absolutely nuts.
That would be nuts. Yeah. And then if we got Georgia and Michigan in the national title, I think that would be great too. Like Georgia versus Ohio State or Michigan, I think is the proper championship based off of everything we've seen this year.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I think it's at the end somehow someone finally breaks TCU because they don't need to be in there. It's going to be a boring game. Someone within either tomorrow with Iowa State, which I doubt, or whoever goes to play them in the Big 12 championship game beats TCU. Then we have, and I think Ohio State's going to beat Michigan. I don't think they're going to cover, but I think Ohio State's going to win that game. We have Georgia number 1, Ohio State number 2, USC number 3, Michigan number 4.
By the way, I
Ohio
hope
State
Ohio
and USC
State
play each other, and
I
then
hope
Georgia
Iowa
and
State
Michigan play each other.
TCU tomorrow, because if they do, that means I don't have to watch the Big 12 championship, and I really don't want to.
That'd be awesome. Same.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. TCU is a 10-point favorite against Iowa State. They are at home. Iowa State is 4-7, by the way. Kansas State is playing 6-5 Kansas, who's better than Iowa State. Kansas State is an 11-point favorite. So Kansas State is favored by 1 more point against a better team than TCU is favored against. I hate to use that transitive property thing, but that seems pretty damning for me. All right. Let's switch over to this. So I want to talk about these tiers thing because Matt Rhule's going to Nebraska. Panther fans, by the way, are all on this wagon of Matt Rhule's not going to work, like whatever. Listen, Matt Rhule is going to be a good coach. Matt Rhule is a good college football coach. He was a good NFL coach. There is not one senior NFL coach that could take over a team quarterbacked by Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield in succession and find success. I'm sorry. The NFL does not work like that. So Matt Rhule turned around Temple quick. They won a conference championship. Ben, is Temple any good this year? No, they suck. No. They are like the new UConn, right? He turned around Baylor very, very quick as well. Now, Dave Aranda had a good year with Baylor last year. They have not been what they were with Matt Rhule. Matt Rhule is going to win games at Nebraska. Now, my thing is what program is Nebraska? And this will be kind of the lead-in for the tiers. I don't think Nebraska is ever going to be Ohio State or Georgia, right? But I also don't look at Nebraska because I heard Cowherd saying this, like Nebraska is never going to be anything more than Rutgers. Like, no. Yeah. Nebraska had 85,000 people at their game the other day. Like, and they're terrible, right? The backing that Nebraska has as a program is absolutely ridiculous, right? So what can they be? I think they can be a slightly better version of Wisconsin or Iowa. That I think is their ceiling. I do think the regional recruiting restrictions are an issue, right? And I do believe that they don't come with the same prominence that an Ohio State or a USC has, right? So there are going to be some issues there, but it is not like it's this impossible place to win. So, Ben, I'm going to give you my tiers. Go ahead.
On Nebraska, I remember, and granted, all the kids at this point think Nebraska is a piece of shit program because that's what it's been for about a decade or so.
Yeah.
But I remember back before the downfall of the Cornhuskers, and dude, that program had legs. It had tradition. It had excitement. It was in the mix every single year. Yeah. And it's just been downtrodden for a decade. But that doesn't mean they can't be a national program again.
Yeah.
Like Nebraska has a history like Notre Dame has a history.
Yes.
And so there's opportunity for them galore. They just need to not suck for 10 years in a row.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important they get this coach right, you know?
Yeah.
And I do think Matt Rhule can win there. All right, so here's my tiers. I want you guys to know I was extremely selective on this. I spent way more time on this than I really should have. Okay, here is my top tier. Now, these are not rankings in order of who's won like the most over the past 5-10 years, whatever. These are rankings in terms of capacity as a program. Okay, so I look at financial backing. I look at fans. I look at your boosters. I look at, yes, your success over the past 20 to 30 years. I think that plays a part. I look at your recruiting potential. I look at your location. All of those things matter. Okay, so tier 1, Ohio State, Alabama, USC, Georgia, which I think just recently joined, by the way, and LSU. And that's it. Those to me are the best programs. So that's 5, the 5 best programs in the country to be a head coach at. Okay. So that's tier 1. Here is tier 2. And I got to tell you, there were a couple of teams I was very, very close to not putting them in here. Tennessee barely made the cut for tier 2. Barely. Clemson, Oregon, Michigan, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida State, Florida, Auburn, and barely making the cut, barely, Texas A&M. I did not want to put them in there, but Texas A&M's got way too much support as a program than I thought they had, and I think it's going to be very telling. here's going to be the true mark of this. If Texas A&M is a tier 2 or tier 3 program, what is the pressure like on Jimbo Fisher after this fiasco? If there is no pressure at the end of this year, and I'm talking like you don't need to fire him, but his name better be on that hot seat. If there's no pressure, listen, you're not a tier 2 program because you wouldn't be anywhere on this list. Anywhere. Okay.
Yep.
If there's some pressure, you're on there. All right. Tier 3, Penn State, Miami, Washington, UCLA. And real quick on there, because somebody's listening to this is going to go, well, hold on, didn't Mario Cristobal leave Oregon to go to Miami? Yes, he did. And that is a sign as to Mario Cristobal's incompetence as a person and as a head coach. So that tells you everything you need to know. Okay. UCLA, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, barely. Virginia Tech, you almost didn't even get in there. UNC and Iowa. Okay. So, Ben, anything, so like when I bring up Nebraska, is there any program on that list that you think Nebraska can't belong with on that tier 3 list? Because I look at all those tier 3 programs and I'm like, Nebraska could be Iowa. Nebraska could be Notre Dame. They could be UNC. They could be what Virginia Tech was. They could be what Michigan State's been on and off for the past decade or so. Like, to me, I think that's Nebraska's capacity as a program.
No, I agree. I'm right there with you. I don't love it, but it's pretty spot on. The
Okay.
3 tiers there.
Any team that you would have moved in or out of a tier?
Did you have Tennessee in tier 2?
I did, reluctantly.
Okay.
They were very close to being tier 3. And I'll tell you why. Why am I blanking on his name? The owner of the Cleveland Browns, who's like Tennessee's biggest booster. Hold on a second. He essentially owns the Tennessee Volunteers.
Well, it's better than Yellowwood.
The Haslams. Jimmy Haslam. Yeah. He also owns the Pilot Flying J truck stops for anybody that's interested. But no, he owns the Cleveland Browns. He is the Volunteers' biggest booster. Here's the thing about Tennessee, which I think is really interesting. Football, basketball, baseball, all 3 of those programs have been investigated by the NCAA in the past 12 years. Every single one. But here's the thing. Tennessee is a fantastic location. You can get talent south. You can get talent north. Tennessee has this insane fan base. Their stadium seats what has it been? Like 110,000 or something? Yeah.
Yep.
And it's packed when they're terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. So I think we have to acknowledge, just because of those factors, like Tennessee has to be in that list. But the dysfunction in that program, and I'm not convinced, by the way, that Heupel long-term is the solution for them. I think he's had a really good run last year and this year. But what's that team going to be like with no Hendon Hooker?
It's going to be, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. And maybe he's the guy. But there's a reason why even in their best year they can't get past Georgia, and I don't know that changes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So any other team?
No. You didn't have Utah in anywhere, right?
No. You listen. And that's the thing. Utah's been really successful. Utah's nowhere near a tier 3, tier 2 program. Nowhere near it. The reason they're successful is because Kyle Whittingham is a freaking amazing coach. He is, I think, the most underrated coach in college football year in and year out. Like, Utah is not long ago a WAC team. The WAC doesn't even exist anymore. And he's gotten them in the Pac-12 and playing consistently at a top level.
You didn't have Florida State in that list, did you?
Florida State's in tier 2.
Tier 2? Okay.
Tier 2, yeah. I think Florida State's a hell of a program. I nearly had them tier 1, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. LSU at tier 1, I reluctantly accept just because they own the state of Louisiana, and pretty much can get anyone around that area as well.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Their level of talent.
I'll be honest, I was actually pretty close to putting them in tier 2. This is where I started spending way too much time on this dumb list. I started looking at state budgets for education, and LSU ranks like near the bottom. So I do, and by the way, like literally, the state of Louisiana almost canceled like college football before COVID because they were struggling to fund their education system. Like they were nearly forced into that. Fortunately, I think in the South, whenever you threaten canceling football, all of a sudden money appears like magic. It's funny how that works. But I do think that's an issue. But other than that, I mean, you look at what LSU has to work with. There is a reason why they can go through coaching turmoil, like going from Les Miles to Ed O, and still bring in one of the best recruiting classes and have one of the best rosters ever.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's interesting being a tier 2 program. You talk about this a couple years ago, potentially tier 1 material. Just because of the history, the backing there. Where was Texas? Is Texas tier 2 as well?
Texas is tier 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think both those teams are on par with each other right now. I can't question in your list. The only thing I'd say is maybe LSU, but I understand why you put them there, just based on the fact that you move a guy, a decent coach in there, and suddenly the program's turned around immediately. That's just the level of talent they have.
I completely agree. And you know, Ben, I think it's interesting with Oklahoma. Like what I've said about Oklahoma and Texas is I think that's to a much smaller scale. That is similar to Michigan, Ohio State, because I think at Ohio State, similar to Oklahoma, it's pretty much we don't care about anything but winning. By the way, I don't think it's problematic. Like I don't say that, and like people, I say that, and people are like, "Oh, you're just saying Oklahoma and Ohio State people are dumb." No, that's not what I'm saying. Like those are still great schools, whatever. But Oklahoma cares a hell of a lot more about football than they do about the midterms. Just telling you right now. At Michigan and Texas, they want to be really competitive. They are committed. But at the end of the day, there is an academic prominence that is expected at both of those programs, and they will not bring in certain recruits if they don't meet that criteria, right? Which means the recruit pool that Jim Harbaugh and Steve Sarkisian have to work with is a lot different than what Ryan Day and Brent Venables have to work with.
Yep, it's very true. I know you've made the argument from Michigan for a long time, just by their academic standards. The same thing is with Texas and Austin. It's a good education system.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, Ben, you're going to know more about this than I would, but I would say it's kind of similar too with Auburn and Alabama. Like I would say Auburn's academics are a little bit more serious than Alabama's. And it's nothing wrong with Alabama, nothing wrong with Auburn. I just think that's the way it is there.
I would say, so Auburn's more of the engineering school and more of the science-based school. For those, we definitely will kick Alabama's ass. But in business school, Bama actually has a better business school than Auburn does. And I'm a business school graduate. So, I mean, take that as you will.
Yeah.
But, yeah, with Alabama's not a bad education. And with the success of their football program, they've had the ability to be more stringent on who gets in. So they can take more of the cream of the crop now. Most Bama fans never set foot on the university campus to actually attend for an education. Yeah. They went to Walmart and got a T-shirt and then paid a scalper for a ticket. So
very true. It's probably an Alabama business graduate that was scalping the ticket.
It probably was.
Well, we'll get into this some other day, but I think if you're going to school for business, you're better to drop out and go actually work than stay in school for business. But we'll talk about that some other day. And I was also a business major for 7 years. So, anyways, that's neither here nor there. And no, I didn't get a doctorate degree. I didn't even get a bachelor's degree. I still went for 7 years though. All right. So let's get into this Auburn job. Now that we've declared this is a tier 2 job. So it feels like it is Lane Kiffin or Hugh Freeze. Lane Kiffin denied it, well, he didn't deny it yesterday, but it was a weird question. So one of the reporters asked him,
do you expect to still be the head coach?
Do you expect to still be the head coach next year? Which, all right, let's just say this. If you're in his shoes and you're coming off a loss and somebody asks you that, what alternative answer do you have? Like, what if you expect him to say, no, I don't expect to be. I'm going to Auburn. Like, what's he supposed to say? Even if the Auburn deal is done, even if he's on the phone with Jimmy Sexton, and Jimmy's like, yeah, Lane, I got you like $10 million to go to Auburn. Is Lane going to go into that press conference and say, I'm not returning to Ole Miss?
Nope.
Exactly. So I didn't look at that answer and think anything of it. I was like, duh. Of course he's going to say that.
Look, Tommy Tuberville, when he was hired away from Ole Miss to become Auburn's head coach, said on a radio broadcast they would have to take him out of Ole Miss in a pine box because he loved working at Ole Miss and coaching at Ole Miss, and he's not going to leave willingly. And then 2 days later, he was Auburn's head coach. So there's a precedent for this. Nick Saban said, I'm not going to be the coach at Alabama. And then 3 days later, it was on a plane in Tuscaloosa being announced. So who knows? Who really cares? Lane did what he had to do in that moment. We'll see if he comes. I think it is a step up from Ole Miss. Look, here's the reason why. Ole Miss just played in the biggest game of the year for them. They played the Egg Bowl, which is their top rivalry, and there were empty seats in Ole Miss. Granted, it was on Thanksgiving, so you have that. But no other big game rivalry would have any capacity in the lower stands. Are you kidding me? So that right there alone is a reason that Auburn is a better program than Ole Miss is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. And I do think the more we're seeing about the Brian Harsin stuff, they really should have separated from that a long time ago. I think the more that's come out, it's been more like, okay, Auburn probably did some stuff they shouldn't have done with that whole story, but there was at least some legs to that whole thing, it looks like now, And so I think that makes Auburn look less dysfunctional than maybe they appeared, 6-7 weeks ago. Right. And that was really, I think, the main thing that was kind of the driving force behind, is Auburn really even a great job or a better job than Ole Miss? Right. But I think it's interesting, Ben. I think 3 weeks ago, to all the Auburn faithful, Hugh Freeze, Lane Kiffin would have been great hires. But now I think you look at it, and it's like, okay, well, Hugh Freeze has lost to UConn and has lost to a terrible Virginia Tech team, both in close games, both because he is starting multiple quarterbacks at week 11. And after this past game, Hugh Freeze came out and said, yeah, I think we need to just settle on one quarterback. And it's like, well, dude, I wish you would have figured that out in September and not wait till the next to last game of the season to settle on a quarterback, And then you look at Lane Kiffin and some of his decision-making last night. I do think if you're an Auburn fan, you're like, they're both good coaches, but neither of these guys are what's getting us over the Nick Saban hump or whoever Alabama hires after that. And then are either of those guys going to get us over Brian Kelly, And if we could maybe just wait a little bit, find somebody that is the guy, could we go get our own Brian Kelly? Is I think the fact that Brian Kelly came into the SEC West and won right away. I do think if you're an Auburn fan, you've got to sit there and say, well, look, we can do better than Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. We can go out and find somebody better than that. And who is that? I don't know. I wasn't super pleased with that. I think if you're Auburn, I think you actually have to take a look at Shane Beamer. I think you got to open up the whole thing. I would look at Shane Beamer. I would legit look at Urban Meyer. I would legit look at keeping Caddy Williams. I think there's a lot of guys that we make this out to be a Hugh Freeze or Lane Kiffin thing. I don't think it has to be, right?
Yep. No, that's where I'm standing as a fan and a grad, and someone who's third generation Auburn faithful. Like the dude with the culture, who's taken the program under his wings for the past 3 weeks, coming up on 4 weeks, in my mind has earned the job. And maybe he has to learn on the fly because he's only been a head coach for 4 weeks. And maybe that's fine, because if you have the culture and the drive and you can be a good player's coach, you can have success. I don't think it would be wise just to make a big-time hire who we have to fire in 5 years and pay, $40 million to go away.
Well, that is kind of what it feels like. Is okay, you bring in Lane Kiffin, but if in 3-4 years that puppy doesn't work out, like you're just going to be right back at square one.
Yep.
And
look, something that is why Auburn deserves to be in the second tier, with Alabama being in the first, is we have this little brother mentality, and I hate it. But we always have and probably always will to Alabama. Got to get away from that. Don't care about what Alabama's doing. Take care of your own business and then go and beat Alabama.
Yeah, well, it's not even like this little brother mentality. I mean, I guess it somewhat is, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's just like you're so focused on just beating Alabama that you're not even focused on improving as a program. And I do think it's a little bit like, okay, what are you going to do this year? Win 5 games? Okay, so if you lose tomorrow at Alabama, you're a 5-17. All right. So next year, it's not about can you win the Iron Bowl. Next year is about can you take us from 5-7 and get us to 8-4. All right. And then year 2, can you take us from 8-4 and add 2 more wins and get us to 10-2? And if every 3 to 4 year period you can be like an 11-1 team competing for the SEC championship when you're not in your great year and you're in your rebuilding years, can you be that 8 to 9 win team and just be that on a consistent basis? That for me, for Auburn, like for most programs, by the way, that's a win. I think this idea that you're going to be Bama, or you're going to be Georgia, or you're going to be Ohio State, I think that's flawed. Just look at, can we improve as a program and just make it about that rather than putting these ridiculous expectations on coaches.
That's where I'm at. Look, I've been in school when we won a national championship under a coach that lasted 3 years. Gene Chizik, I watched him blow a game against NC State today as their defensive coordinator. Still love the man. He's still my coach. I'm fine for one of those for the next 3 years or so.
Yeah.
But once again, it's not my decision.
It should be. It should be your decision. By the way, so LSU is going to go to Texas A&M tomorrow. Yep. And LSU is only a 10-point favorite at Texas A&M. Now, I think LSU wins. But Ben, there's been so much crap talked about Jimbo Fisher, so much crap talked about that team. They don't have a bowl game to play for, right? So tomorrow's Texas A&M season. I'm just throwing this out there. It feels like a trap game for LSU.
Oh, I completely agree. Look, LSU has not looked good. They looked like trash against an Arkansas team who needs to learn how to kick field goals and not go for it on 4th down every single time. By the way, Lane Kiffin, I hope you're listening. Same thing for you. You want to see a coach who's learned that after one game, Cadillac started kicking field goals, and look, won the past 2. Texas A&M has an opportunity here to expose LSU. There's some key areas that LSU struggles with, and Texas A&M struggles all across the board. But you're right. This is their season. This is their championship game. This is their 5th win.
Yeah.
And even with a 5th win, there's a potential to get into a bowl game if you don't look like garbage. Beating LSU potentially gets you into that.
So, well, I don't know if they can, because I think there's going to be too many eligible teams to even fit all the eligible teams from what I was saying earlier. I think there's
is that right?
There's 6 spots left, and there's 12 teams that could be eligible. Now, out of those 12 teams, by the way, Georgia Tech's won. They're going to play Georgia tomorrow, so they ain't winning that. Auburn's won. They're going to play Alabama tomorrow, so they ain't winning that.
Winning.
There is one. What's that?
Look for Auburn to win.
It would be incredible. I don't see it. There is one that's really interesting, though. And this is going to blow your mind a little bit.
What was that?
Vanderbilt. And they play Tennessee. And Tennessee doesn't have Hendon Hooker.
That's true.
And Tennessee's only a 14-point favorite at Vandy. Vandy wins. They're 6-6, and they're in a bowl. That is going to be wild. If the team that knocked off Bama, we thought for sure was a shoe-in to the playoff, gets dropped by Vandy at the end of the year.
It's possible.
That would be incredible.
Here's the thing. Tennessee's backup, Michigan's old quarterback. What's his name? Oh, my gosh.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Joe Melton.
Yeah. He's good.
Yeah. He's very good.
He was highly touted as a recruit when he went to Michigan. And when he transferred in, I thought he was going to be the next big thing at Tennessee until Hooker came over.
Right.
So, yeah, Joe Melton is a good player. Shouldn't have any trouble.
Good. We also have Oregon going to ranked Oregon State tomorrow. I don't know that Oregon realistically is a shot to get in the playoff, but they're sitting there at 9. And Oregon State is ranked 21st, so that would be a massive win if they pulled it off.
Even if Oregon had won out, it would have been tough to put them in with a 44-point loss or something?
I think it was 47-7 or something at the start of the year.
It was 3.
49-3. 49-3. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah, you can't put a 10-2 team with a 46-point loss into that thing. And then you've got USC and Notre Dame tomorrow. USC a 4.5-point favorite. That's at 7:30. That game I think could be wild.
Mm-hmm.
But by the way, I know we were talking about Notre Dame's head coach Marcus. What's his last name?
Freeman.
Marcus Freeman. We were talking about him being a bust at the start of the year. You realize they're 8-3, and if they won tomorrow, they'd be 9-3 with an upset over USC.
I didn't say he was a bust. You're the one saying he's a coordinator. Look,
it was a universal we. You know what I mean. Listen, they started off the year 3-3 with losses to Marshall and Stanford.
You're right. That was disappointing and should not have happened. And you said that this is the best team that Chip Kelly ever had, or Brian Kelly, whatever his name is.
Most talented, yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm still not convinced that they're even good. They beat Syracuse, who's now terrible. They beat Clemson, who I don't believe in at all. They nearly lost to Navy a couple of weeks ago. Like, you could still look at their resume and go, they really don't have a great win. I mean, okay, fine. Give them the thing against Clemson. But, I mean, Clemson, they're beating them in a bad year. Clemson doesn't have a quarterback. So if they lose to, I mean, it's just interesting. Like, if they beat USC tomorrow, we look at Marcus Freeman as like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to work. If they lose, they're 8-4 without a big win, and they lost to Marshall and Stanford.
It's tough.
It is tough.
I still think in the long run, Marcus Freeman will have a good run. They got to give him time.
Tell you what, Chip Kelly should go be the coach at Auburn.
No, absolutely not. Chip Kelly makes stupid decisions as well.
Yeah, but they're smarter than decisions.
What? No. Let him stay and go to the Big Ten. Enjoy the Big Ten, Chip.
It is interesting seeing Nebraska hire Matt Rhule rather than going to Chip Kelly or the Urban Meyer route. I think a lot of people thought, I thought if Urban's going to return to college football, Nebraska would be the place for him to go.
You wouldn't have any heart attacks up there because there's not a lot of pressure.
Where would, if he comes back, where would he go?
UCF when Gus goes to Ole Miss.
He would not go to UCF. Urban Meyer would just stay retired. Why would he come back to college football to go to UCF?
Because he already knows the state of Florida. He's got connections.
Doesn't matter.
And it's a pretty sweet gig.
Listen,
he'd own the Big 12.
I don't think Urban Meyer is coming back to college football unless it's for one of those programs I listed in my tiers. But I don't know which one of those
coming back. Let him stay a commentator. We don't need him.
You need him?
No, we don't need him as a head coach. Let him stay as a commentator on Fox.
Tell you what would be really interesting. So Bill O'Brien, by the way, I think is taking a head coaching job at the end of this year because I think Nick Saban's going to force him to. He's going to say, Bill, look, like either I'm firing you or you take a different job. Like it's one of the two. Yeah. Yep. So I think Bill O'Brien's gone.
Agreed.
Would Nick hire Urban as his offensive coordinator?
It's worked for other coaches.
It has.
Yes, I'm sure he'd
give like Urban's probably beyond that.
Probably.
But I think it'd be interesting.
Agreed.
I think it'd be real interesting. I also think it'd be interesting if Lane Kiffin gets the Auburn job. And I know it wouldn't actually happen, but he should just offer Hugh Freeze the defensive coordinator position.
Why?
Like if you want to go ultimate troll, that would be the way to do
it. He probably will do something on Twitter like that.
I hope so.
I'll tell you the best fit for Lane Kiffin and Auburn is, and this could blow up here pretty soon because of Elon Musk, but Auburn Twitter and Lane Kiffin Twitter would fit very well together.
Well, I saw somebody tweeting about that. The thing you sent me, somebody was saying that. Yeah, I do think that's true. The Junk Aubie and Lane Kiffin marriage needs to happen.
Twitter could be for tomorrow. So
Liberty really Twitter is pretty great. So Liberty has Liberty had they still do this. They do like a March Madness tournament of like the favorite like Twitter accounts on Liberty Twitter. And
you were up there. You made it to round 2.
Yeah.
Round 2 or 3, right?
I made it to the Sweet 16.
There you go.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So, anyways, it's a lot of fun. But Hugh Freeze really, really gets into it, and it's kind of amazing. Like his Twitter game is pretty darn good. Just say, I don't think it's like Lane Kiffin is a different level because Lane Kiffin just trolls without care. But Hughes is pretty good too.
Yep.
So, you know who else has a really good Twitter game is Gus Malzahn. Y'all should hire him.
Well, I think we're still paying the man. So,
if you hire him, do you still have to pay his buyout fee?
Probably.
I mean, if Lane and Hugh both said no, and Caddy said no, which Caddy wouldn't do that.
Caddy would say yes.
Kenny would say yes. But I'm just saying, like, if you were at a point where those three guys weren't options, at what point would you actually have to make a call to Gus?
Nah, never.
Never?
You'd never bring Gus back. No, here's the reason why. Is because the boosters would just make the call at that point. And they'd bring in someone that they can order around. So Auburn's old
Another
defensive
booster?
coordinator. Was that?
Another booster?
It wouldn't be a booster, but Auburn's old defensive coordinator that jumped around to like 5 jobs within 5 months.
Yeah.
Kevin Steele? Kevin Steele would be the next thing.
Yeah.
No doubt.
That makes sense. The Auburn boosters are fascinating to me. I mean, it's like its own mafia, which if you've ever been to Auburn, which I have once, I was there for a week for Ben's wedding. I think I ate at the Jimmy John's there about 3 times. Really good.
Not the best place.
It's okay. It's not bad. A barbecue joint there was really good. I forget what the name of that was.
Yeah, Mike and Ed's is gone.
It's gone?
Yeah, they shut it down during COVID.
That was the place we went, wasn't it?
It was. It was great.
Okay. Yeah.
My favorite place.
That sucks. That sucks so bad. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. Auburn's just a real small town. But I swear it's run by like the mafia. Like, it's real weird.
Yeah. It's Bobby Louder who owns all the land. And then Jimmy Rain, Mr. Yellowwood himself, who has all the money.
It's so weird. It's like a bigger version of Oklahoma State. It's Oklahoma State has T. Boone Pickens that just runs everything.
It's weird.
Yeah. It was really bizarre. All right, we got to go. This went way longer than I thought, but it was good. Any closing thoughts, Ben?
Hey, look, it's rivalry weekend. It's going to be a lot of good games. We've had some good ones so far. I'm going to go catch the end of Florida FSU here. Go Gators. Chomp, chomp. I'm pulling for whoever the heck is playing TCU, and I hope that they fumble the ball 15 times and finally get out of the playoff talk so we can have some good teams in the playoff this year.
Nice. Yeah. Duke plays Wake tomorrow, by the way.
Go Blue Devils.
I'll tell you this. Duke hired Mike Elko, who was Texas A&M's defensive coordinator last year. It is amazing how bad Texas A&M's defense is, how good Duke is now, and also the fact that Mike Elko was supposed to be the hire at Virginia Tech, but Tech didn't hire him. They hired Brent Pry instead. Tech, you hired the wrong guy, and I appreciate it because he is killing it at Duke.
Right there with you. I salute you, Virginia Tech. Keep that guy on staff. Extend his contract.
Just bring Fuente back. Let Fuente be recruiting coordinator.
Go get some guys in Texas.
Oh, my God. It'd be brutal. Yeah. I mean, listen, Texas is not great. Oklahoma is not great. And Virginia Tech's got a team of a bunch of players that those two programs didn't want. So it all makes sense.
There it is.
All right, guys. Y'all have a good one. Enjoy this week. We'll be back next week with some great conference championship stuff. Talk to y'all soon.